Hello, everybody, and welcome to Away Games, a Chicago Cubs podcast hosted by two comedians who live in New York but love the Cubs anyway. I'm one of them. My name is Adam Mamawala, and we are usually joined by Kevin McCaffrey. But today we are joined by really the ultimate pinch hitter. With all, I'd say, I don't want to insult Ken Schultz, but we've got another ultimate pinch hitter, Sara Sanchez, joining the pod today. Of course, you know Sara Sanchez from her work at Bleed Cubby Blue and many other places. Sara, how are you? And welcome to the show.
Hi, Adam. I am great. It is the day after the 4th of July, and I got a ton of steps in and a lot of sun and some good rest. And I'm happy to be here. And honestly, high praise comparing me to our dear friend Ken Schultz, who is one of my favorite people to watch baseball with, but really just to hang out with generally.
He is absolutely the best. And Ken, if you're listening to this, I would say it to your face. What is that from The Office, where it's like he's a wonderful guy, and I, but I'd never say it to his face. Why wouldn't you say it to his face?
Yeah, I think that's because the office is filled with bad people. Like, I would definitely tell Ken that to his face, too.
Yes, absolutely. So let's kind of backtrack here. Obviously, it has not been a great week for the Cubs. Let's just kind of go backwards in time. So, how much of the games against the Brewers did you watch the last couple of days? Were you out and about doing Fourth of July things? Did you actually get to watch the games?
I watched all of them. I watched every second. Although I
Oh
should
God.
say, for the first one, I was cleaning out my closet because I've
Hmm.
needed to do that for like 4 years. And so I was kind of like, had it on the TV, was going in and out of the room while I was like sorting things and
Yeah.
putting stuff in the take to the thrift store pile versus the throw away forever pile versus the no, you get to go back in the closet pile.
Maybe the Cubs should do some spring cleaning. I don't know. Did you find Miles Mastrobuoni in your closet anywhere?
I did not. Miles Mastrobuoni is not in my closet, but the Cubs should absolutely do some spring cleaning. So the thing about these last two games that I will say, one, it is terribly disappointing to have lost either of them. But at
Yeah.
least they did not lose both of them because
Oh
if they
yeah.
had lost both of those games after leading by crooked numbers early in them, I think the season might have been over. I think that failing to win at least one of those games could have absolutely decimated the Cubs season.
Yeah, it's actually very interesting because I think when you look at these last two games as we're recording this on Wednesday before the third game of the series, um, it's very easy to look at Monday's loss where the Cubs were up 6-0 and blew the lead as the moment where you're like, okay, this was when the season was definitively over and there was no coming back from it. But then you can look at yesterday's win in the same light as like, hey, if the Cubs actually do somehow right the ship here and at least get back to being competitive or playing meaningful games in September, we're going to look back on that and be like, wow, if we had lost that game in that way, I don't know that we could have come back from that.
I totally agree with you on both counts, and I guess the question is, which of these games do you wanna talk about first, the disappointment or the joyous one? Because
Let's
we can
talk.
go in either order.
Yeah, let's talk about the disappointment for sure because it's happier to be able to talk about. It was still an incredibly stressful game yesterday, but at least it ended well. So let talk me through your emotions watching. So to clarify on Monday, I was watching until the Cubs were up 5-0 when I left to go out. And
Ooh.
I do this thing where I don't check the score, and because I live in New York, I'm able to pretty successfully not find out the score, and then I come home and I watch the game in its entirety later. And so it was like extra upsetting to me that I left, had a whole afternoon being like, well, the Cubs must have won this game, and then got home and slowly and painfully made my way through the rest of it. So, what was your thought process watching that game? When did you start to feel like the wheels were coming off? And do you have any thoughts on kind of Ross's bullpen management, all of the discourse about that?
God, I have so many thoughts. My first thought watching this game was, "Oh, clearly the Cubs do better when I do my chores, so I should obviously clean my apartment more often when the Cubs are doing things," and I honestly was gonna be like, "Yeah, this is gonna be great. The Cubs winning streak will coincide with me getting my life in order. This will be fantastic." The early part of that game was incredible. The Cubs put together some great at bats. Everything was looking good. Nothing looked terribly out of sorts. And then it just kind of chipped away, chipped away, chipped away. And I think the thing that was most distressing is when was it Anthony Kay who came in? Yeah, because the Cubs
Yeah.
were trying to do the lefty righty splits
Hmm.
thing. And honestly, like, I think I would have just left Julian Merriweather in there. Like, I don't really trust Anthony Kay all that much, but Anthony Kay comes in, it winds up being a situation where they double switch out, and so instead of Jesse Winker taking the at bat, Jemai Jones, sorry, I like
Yeah.
Jemai Jones, who if my life had depended on knowing that Jemai Jones was a Major League Baseball player before Monday, I think I would not have survived. Like if
Well,
like yes, no
he
question,
wasn't. I
50-50
mean,
shot, I probably would not,
yeah.
it would have
It
been a
was
guess.
his I believe it was his first game since 2021, which of course that would happen.
So the lefty righty splits thing is terribly annoying. The fact that David Ross didn't stick with his better pitcher to try to get a big out in that spot and just let Julian Merriweather pitch to Jesse Winker, who has not been great this season, really was frustrating. But the thing that was more frustrating is that the Cubs just felt like the Cubs had no fight. Like the
Yeah.
Brewers tied that game and the Cubs were going to do nothing. Like they were just like, oh, well, this is how we lose today. And
It felt a little
I,
bit like that second London game where as soon as
it
they
did.
went down, you were like, "Oh, there's no way we're winning this game."
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was the thing that made the 4th of July comeback even better
Mhm.
because it really felt like if they didn't come back there, that was just going to be the story of the season. That this is a team that has no fight, that can't come back late, that can't get things done. And the fact that they were able to come back might have righted the ship a little bit. But yeah, I just stop with the lefty righty stuff or go out and get a real lefty, right? Like Brandon Hughes isn't
Yeah.
coming back for a while. Like Anthony Kay is not that dude. I don't know why they couldn't sign Andrew Chafin in the offseason. Chafin's having an excellent career with or year
Mhm.
with the Diamondbacks
Yeah.
and would have made an ideal lefty guy for this pen, but he's not here and you need a lefty arm somehow.
Well, what I was seeing a lot on Cubs Twitter was more it was less people thinking that we should have stuck with Merriweather because he was pretty wild that inning. Like you don't want to have Merriweather stay in and then walk in a run at that point if he's clearly got command issues. What I saw more people annoyed about was that we could have brought in Mark Leiter Jr. to just face Winker because Leiter's like splits against lefties are solid, rather than play this weird chess match where I guess it's hard to criticize Ross for creating a scenario in which a guy who hasn't had a big league game in 2 years ends up beating you. But if the ultimate question is, would you rather have Mark Leiter with the bases loaded facing Jesse Winker or Anthony Kay facing Jemai Jones? I don't know. Maybe it's one of those hindsight things where we're only talking about it because it didn't work out. But I agree with you. As soon as that game was tied, there was no part of me that was like, "Oh, the Cubs will still win this game."
Yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, I could also see having brought in Leiter there, although interestingly, like Leiter didn't look great the last couple of days
Yeah.
either. It's not like Leiter has looked a little hit and miss here too. I think that there's something to be said for the Cubs have a bullpen where Merriweather, Leiter, and Alzolay are sort of solidifying in their roles, and they're not fully there yet. Like
Hmm.
Alzolay had some moments during the series where he didn't look particularly great either. You know, we can talk about it when we get to the 4th of July game, but it's just one of these situations where back of the bullpen was supposed to be Brad Boxberger and Michael Fulmer. They have not solidified into those roles at all. Boxberger's on the IL, and Fulmer is starting to look better. He's been pretty good over his last dozen-ish plus starts, but still started so poorly that you can't really trust him in a high leverage situation. And so the guys who got the circle of trust treatment, Merriweather, Leiter, and Alzolay, they're still like only there 95, 85% of the time. Like there's gonna be blowups, and it's just like you cannot make a run at the division when you don't have the back of a bullpen.
Yeah, it's true, and it, obviously Smiley. It's not like Smiley was bad, but the Brewers have not been good against lefties at all. So, being up 6-0 on Monday with Smiley on the mound, you had to feel pretty good about that. Also, side note, I'm very disappointed that the rotations were shuffled, so we didn't get the Smiley versus Miley matchup. That I was looking. It was on there for a while, and I was very much looking forward to that. But yeah, he Smiley seemed to. I don't want to say lose focus, but like in the way that sometimes when a pitcher is staked to a bigger lead, you can just see that their approach is different and it doesn't have good results. I don't know if that was the issue, but the point is, if you're up 6-0 at any point in the game, you should be able to hold that lead. And Monday reminded me a lot, and I'm sure you sadly remember this game, but you remember back in 2021, like in that 1 week stretch where we went from being atop the division to like, oh my God, we're going to sell off. Cubs had that combined no hitter against the Dodgers, and then they lost the remaining games against the Dodgers. They went into a series at Miller Park. I think it was still called Miller Park at that time. They lost the first two games, and then the third game, it was like the Cubs need to get off the schneid. They need to win this game. They score 7 in the top of the first, and then Arrieta just completely melts down. They lose 7-15, and that was the game that when you look back at that 2021 season and what ended up happening at the trade deadline, you're like, oh, it was that game. That was the one that was like, no, this team is not gonna get it together.
I do remember that. I was thinking about that during the series. I mean, I curious what you think about this because it does seem like this team has a tendency to jump out to early leads and then do nothing. And like, I
Yeah.
haven't looked at this from a box score by box score perspective. It could just be like recency bias, but it really does feel like you're kind of comfortable when they have a 4, 5, 6 run lead and then the game gets too close and they can't pick it up at the end. So it's really glad to see them put a run on the board in extras and pick it up at the end. But at the same time, I do worry but this team sort of loses its focus and ability to come back. Like they haven't had a ton of comeback victories this season.
Yeah, it's true, and even before the run in the 11th, like Amaya getting that 2 run double was huge because if the Cubs don't have that 6-2 lead, maybe they end up losing 6-4 or something like that. So at least they were tacking on yesterday. And yeah, let's I guess get into yesterday's game. So um, the way that I watch games when I watch them after the fact is that I have the MLB TV package, and then when I come home, if the game is already done, it's just like however long the game was is what the recording is. But what that means is that I could see from the beginning when I started watching when I got home from like a Fourth of July party, I could see that the game was 3.5 hours long. So even as the Cubs are up 6-2, I'm like, well, I have to assume this game goes to extra innings. So I'm just waiting for them to blow it because I know there's no other reason that the game would be 3.5 hours long. So when it finally happens, then I'm like playing this game of all right. Well, now there's 30 minutes left in the recording, so that means that if the Cubs don't score here, it's likely that it's a very strange way that I watch sports, and I completely recognize that. But um, all that to say, I mean, did Nico Horner and Ian Happ and Palencia save the season?
I want to say something about Ian Happ and the way this game ended because I kind of want to write a piece about this, but I haven't figured out how to write it yet. So one, Ian Happ made not one but two incredible throws from the outfield
Perfect
that,
throws.
like, honestly, I was in charge of outs above average. I think that's worth like 17 outs above average, just those two throws. Like,
Should be.
and I know that's not how outs above average works, so you don't have to come yell at me on Twitter. Like, I do understand how statistics work, but also I think they should be weighted like GPAs, right? Like, you should have like plays are just substantially more difficult than others, and
Yeah,
Ian
if it
Happ should
plays
get
that
all of the
literally
degrees of
saves the
difficulty,
game, right?
right? So yes, I think they did kind of save the season there. Two, Miguel Amaya having the presence of mind to throw to Nico Horner and get the out at second, outstanding. Nico Horner doing a literal Superman. Like if you exercise or do yoga at all, let's move is called a Superman to like reach out and tag. I can't even remember who it was on second. Willie Adonis, maybe? I don't remember. It doesn't matter. Beautiful play, 10-10, no notes. Yes, I think that they saved the season. Like, I think that the combination of two bullet throws from Ian Happ, great defense from Amaya and Horner, absolutely saved the season. Daniel Palencia was nails. He was throwing 100 miles per hour, was not phased in his major league debut at all. And the last thing I will say here is I don't know what the opposite of a walk-off is, but I think it is whatever Ian Happ did to end the game on that throw. And I think what
Yeah.
Ian Happ did is more exciting than a walk-off. So we need a whole new stat. And I'm open for names.
I think they should have made Bernie Brewer climb up the slide. I feel like that would be the only way to to officially have an anti walk off in Milwaukee. Yeah, it was. First of all, so much credit to Palencia because usually when a guy gets called up, they're intentionally looking for a scenario where they can like ease someone into it. They're going to throw someone in at the in the seventh inning in a game where it's a 6 run deficit, right? But you don't always get to do that, and so in he comes in an incredibly big spot with the Cubs. It seems dramatic to say, but it felt like kind of the season on the line if they lost that game. Um, and yeah, he looked very composed. He was fired up. Amaya was fired up. I totally agree with what you said about Amaya having the presence of mind to make that throw to second. And yeah, as far as Happ is concerned, like the the second play almost was less impressive than the first, because the first, obviously the stakes were so high. If that run scores, the game is over. And it also, like, who I'm blanking on who that was who was tagging from third. It was the same person who got thrown out, or who Nico tagged at second. I got to look at the box score.
1 second. I've got Baseball Reference up. I was trying to
Yeah.
mute my other computer, which is making
Oh no,
notification
that's okay.
sounds.
It's a,
Uh,
I know he's a white dude. I don't
I
remember
mean, that
his
doesn't
name.
help a lot,
It doesn't.
honestly. It looks like uh, okay. There's got to be an easier way to do this. I love Baseball
Either
Reference,
way,
but like
yeah,
looking at their game pages is sometimes difficult. So,
yeah.
it is this is riveting radio. I'm sure all your
Oh,
listeners are like love watching
absolutely.
me scroll. Uh so Owen Miller
There it
um
is. Yeah. And Miller was
was
also the person who was picked off on second.
yes. Yeah. Owen Miller.
By the way, as I was also trying to do research, I happened to I had pulled up the box score from that horrible 2021 game. One guess as to who the final Cubs pitcher was in that horrible 15-7 loss in 2021. You're not going to like the answer, but one guess.
Is it Andrew Chafin? Just kidding.
It is a position player who none of us
Oh,
liked.
position player none of us liked in 2021.
Hmm.
I liked most of the position players in 2021. So Addison Russell?
Eric Sogard.
Oh God, I forgot about that. I'm like, yeah, Addison Russell, I think, was gone by that point. I had blocked
Yeah,
the fact that Eric Sogard played for the Cubs from my memory. Thank you for that reminder, Adam.
I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry. Um,
Sogard lived in my building that year, so I used to
oh,
see him
weird.
all the time. Yeah,
Interesting. Well, I hope he was wearing a mask because he didn't like
he most
vaccines.
certainly was not wearing a
Oh
mask
boy.
at all through COVID.
Yeah, that sounds right. Um, so yeah, it was a wild couple of games. Now, I guess the big thing is that you could look at last night and say, well, it was a game. We also haven't talked about the fact that Napoli and Rossi both got ejected, and rightfully so. I mean, that was one of the worst called games I've seen in a very long time.
I have not looked at the scorecard for Eric Marcus in that game yet. He was a disaster. The thing that was so weird
Horrible.
about the sequence, got Napoli and Ross ejected, is that he literally punches out Dansby on strike two, and everybody is confused. Like Nico's over there, like he's not out. Like to end, it would end the inning because Eric Bacchus doesn't know what the count is. And so Napoli really intervenes because he's trying to keep Nico from getting tossed out of the game. And Ross intervenes because he's trying to keep Dansby from getting tossed out of the game.
Right.
And both of them are really just trying to say, hey, dude, it's strike two. And somehow this series of events results in both Napoli and David Ross being kicked out of the game for, I guess, knowing what the count was.
Yeah, there was a strike three call on Nico that was 8 inches off the plate, maybe more. It was really bad.
Yeah, it was pathetic. I mean, it was honestly, and here's the thing. He has been that dude before. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Hmm.
we know who Eric Bacchus is because whenever he is behind the plate and the Cubs are playing, we'll talk about it on the freaking podcast, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so I don't know if you happen to see David Ross's comments after
Oh, I
the
sure
game
did.
on all of this. Well, David Ross was fired up, and it was not just about Bacchus. Like part of it is Bacchus and the fact that he is absolutely terrible and was awful in that game, was that Milwaukee closes the roof in the middle of an inning while the Cubs are at the plate yesterday. Like
Yeah.
Milwaukee starts playing shenanigans with the roofs and the shadows in the middle of the afternoon. It was talked about on the Cubs broadcast. I heard on Twitter, I have not watched the Brewers broadcast, but I heard that it was talked about on the Brewers broadcast as well. And David Ross had just had it at the end of this. And so he comes out for his post game. And I mean, is this a family show?
No.
David Ross said words that you cannot say on family shows. I believe the term was fucking horseshit, is
Yeah.
what David Ross said, like with the cameras rolling at Marquee. I screen grabbed it. A bunch of people screen grabbed it, but also David Ross is 100% right, and I think I like him more than I've liked him at any point in time since Game 7. So go David Ross.
Yeah, I think somebody specifically asked, "What did you think about the roof closing in the middle of an inning?" And he said, "I fucking thought it was fucking horseshit."
And then like remembered he was on TV.
Yeah,
The look on his face when he's like, "Oh, that's going to cost me a few
but
$1,000."
we might need some of that. I'm not saying that Ross is somebody who doesn't care, but if the Cubs have been playing really poorly since that second London game, they have been playing really bad baseball, and maybe you need something like that to happen to fire people up. I would hope that you don't actually need something that drastic, but um, when we look back since that second London game, Cubs get swept at home by Philly. They win only one of three in Cleveland, and that's also another interesting thing to talk about. When you talk about the team having fight or not having fight, they showed a hell of a lot of fight on Sunday to come all the way back from a 6-1 deficit late.
Yes, they did.
It was kind of like the reverse version of that horrible game we lost to the Astros earlier this year, which I think was also a 6-1 lead that we blew. But yeah, the Cubs come all the way back. They tie the game against one of the best closers in the league, and in Class A, and then lose in extras. And that one, it was almost harder because it's like if they just lost 6-1, you'd be annoyed, but it wouldn't be like, oh, they got all the way back and then they got away from them. So to have lost that game and then the Monday game, and then if they had lost yesterday, I just don't know how emotionally the team gets over that.
I mean, I don't know if they're going to get over it or not, even with the win yesterday. But I think the win yesterday at least gives them a fighting chance, right? The homestand was
Yeah,
bad. You cannot lose 5 of 6 games to the Phillies and Cleveland and feel good about where they're at. They're lucky
no,
that the division is terrible and that didn't push them out of the division entirely.
yeah. Any almost any other division other than the AL Central, the Cubs would be long since out of it.
Can I return to this Milwaukee roof shenanigans thing for
Sure,
one
yeah,
second, though?
please.
Because one of the things that I think is undercovered that people maybe forget from the sign stealing scandal and all of that jazz, like the Astros were the headliner for the sign stealing stuff. The Red Sox were kind of like the subhead because they had the issues with Cora the next season. There were more teams in baseball who were accused of lots of shenanigans during that time period.
Hmm.
And the rumors just never got nearly as loud or as substantiated as what happened with the Astros or later with the Red Sox. There were rumors about the Dodgers. I was just reading Evan Drellick's great book on this. And so you should definitely check that out if you're
Mm.
so inclined. But you know, the Dodgers were implicated here. The Yankees were implicated here. Carlos Beltran apparently brought like what he was doing with the Yankees over to the Astros, which is how the whole thing kind of got started.
Ah.
And the Brewers, there were rumors that the Brewers were playing around with the lights and other things at Miller Park. And if you recall, like Christian Yelich goes from being MVP Yelich to being a pumpkin, like in the drop of a hat.
Hmm.
Like all of a sudden, the Brewers have like no offense to speak of for multiple seasons, and it's a total situation. And so the idea that we're all watching real time while they're like there's no rain in the area, there's nothing threatening in Milwaukee that like the
Well,
rain
nothing
never
makes Craig Counsell
materializes.
angrier than a rain delay, as we know.
So I would just like to say that the Brewers need to have some scrutiny placed on their usage of the roof there because it seems like a thing that people know about at this point in time, and they're just playing
Yeah.
fast and loose.
There, you would think that there would be some sort of league mandated rule about when a team can and cannot open and close a roof. I mean,
One would think.
what are they going to have
Like,
like a moving batter's eye when the Cubs are at bat next?
well, and there's nothing comparable that you can do at Wrigley Field, right? Like,
No.
there's no way to change I guess you could change the lights at night, make them dimmer or something like that, but like you would never do that. And it would be so obvious. There's no reason
Maybe
that
we
you
could
could ever actually do it.
only allow snake cups while the Brewers are batting.
Those cups, the cup snakes to get rid of the Brewers.
The
Maybe,
cup
maybe
snakes,
we
yeah.
should have a new like wave only when the Brewers are hitting.
I
So
like
no
that.
wave at Wrigley except against the Brewers. No,
Yeah,
I
it's
don't.
like waving the little things when people are shooting free throws.
Yeah, we need something comparable because I feel like if the Brewers have such an absurd way to cheat that nobody else in the division has
Yeah.
access to, it is a disadvantage for the rest of the NL Central. And at this point in time, particularly after what happened on the 4th of July, like I would like to know what is going on with the Brewers and how they use that roof.
Yeah. Well, nothing more American than by finding shady ways to win things.
Nothing more baseball than finding shady ways to win things. I mean, one of
That's
my
true.
favorite things about the sport is pushing the lines right up to the point where they bend but don't break is
Right.
fairly encouraged in the history of the sport.
Yeah, well, and the shadows definitely played a factor. I think it was the Monday game where that ball got past Jared Young at first that seemed to be like coming out of the sun into the shadows and seemingly had an impact on whether or not he can make the play.
Absolutely.
So looking forward before we wrap up here, the Cubs have two more games against the Brewers. Then they have three at Yankee Stadium. I will be attending at least two, maybe three of those. God help me. What am I doing to myself?
Adam, the Cubs have never won
I
at
know.
Yankee Stadium, and
I've been to many of those games.
I
Yeah.
really need you to end that streak. I need you to end it like maybe they can sweep the Yankees and like just, start regressing that to the mean a little bit.
I have been watching the Cubs lose at Yankee Stadium for so long that I once saw Sergio Mitre lose a start there. That is how long I have been waiting to see the Cubs. Well, I believe it was 2004, something like that, 2005, I want to say. Derek Lee threw me a ball. Shout out Derek Lee.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, amazing on the Derek Lee ball, not amazing on watching Cubs lose at Yankee Stadium. I mean, I feel like they need to take both of these remaining games against the Brewers,
They
and then they
have
need
to.
to just absolutely do damage to a three out against the Yankees before the All Star break. I don't know how much confidence I have in that, particularly since it appears Jameson Taillon is still going to get a chance to pitch. Which why is Jameson Taillon still in the rotation at all?
It really makes me sad because there are a few people on the Cubs I wanted to root for more this year, coming into the season, and to just see him, he just doesn't look like the same guy. And maybe there's something mechanical that they can fix, or maybe there's something else going on. But I don't know how you justify running him out there every five starts. I'm surprised there hasn't been some sort of like phantom IL stint for him. But yeah, so the next two games, Steele and Stroman, for the last two times until they make appearances. Maybe one of them starting the All Star game. I'm sure they won't because of biases and such things. But yeah, so Steele versus Hauser tonight, Stroman versus Peralta tomorrow, and then the as of now, it looks like Tyon, Smiley, and Hendricks this weekend. So we'll see.
I mean, the Steele and Stroman have both been nails this season. They both deserve to start the All Star game, as far as I'm concerned. One of the things that I will say is that with Clayton Kershaw hitting the IL, I think that the sort of nostalgic favorite to start the All Star game is off the table because Kershaw will not start that game, and so it,
Right.
it opens the door for either Steele or Stroman, who I think have the next best case to start the All
Mm-hmm.
Star game, and so I would love to see one of them get the nod there.
And hopefully they
Maybe
both throw gems and make their cases even more the next 2 days.
God, I hope so. I mean, Milwaukee is not exactly a great power hitting team. Both of them should do reasonably well against the
Yeah.
Brewers offense. So, or lack thereof, I have a lot of faith in Steele and Stroman to get things done there. I don't know how much faith I have in the Cubs offense to keep
Right.
things up. I will say, minus the Tyon start, and I just, throwing Jameson Tyon against even an Aaron Judgeless Yankees team really does not strike me as a recipe for winning
Right.
going into the All Star break. I hope that David Ross will have Javier Assad ready to rock because
Mm-hmm.
he's gonna be needed for like 4 innings, and I'd like David Ross to pull that card early, not
Yeah.
late. Um, the other matchups seem great to me. I think that the Cubs have as good of a chance to beat this Yankees team as they've had at any point in time. The
I
the
mean,
Yankees
Smiley
without
versus
Judge
Cole is a little tough.
is, but like it's I don't. So, what do you think of Drew Smiley at the moment? Drew Smiley has not looked as good as he did to start the season. It sort of looks like his pitch mix is having some
Yeah.
issues, and his last three starts have not exactly been stellar.
I unfortunately I think that we're getting from Drew Smiley more of what I thought we would get from Drew Smiley, which is to say that I didn't think he would be as good as he was early in the season. So hopefully it's somewhere in between. But you look at, I think I saw this on Twitter today, like Steele, Stroman, and Hendricks all have ERAs in the twos, I think. So if Smiley can even be at a 3.54, you got to feel pretty good about that.
Kyle Hendricks looks like vintage Kyle Hendricks,
He does.
and I
I'm
am
very excited to
very
see him
here for
Sunday.
vintage Kyle
Yeah.
Hendricks.
I'm very excited I get to see him on Sunday. Now, interestingly, Friday, so the Cubs, it looks like tie-on for the Cubs. They're facing the Yankee debut for Carlos Rodon, and that is particularly interesting to me because I actually saw his last start this past Saturday at a minor league baseball game. I was up in the Catskills with my girlfriend, and we went to a Hudson Valley Renegades game. They're the Single A affiliate of the Yankees. I had no idea Rodon was pitching, and then we get there, and look who's on the mound, Mister $162 million man pitching in a tiny stadium in New York.
Well, Adam, then you got to give us the scouting report. How did he look? Does it look like the Cubs can do damage? Is the
He
stuff
looked pretty
as good as it
good.
used to be?
I want to say that the Cubs are better than a single A team. I don't feel that way all the time, but if they do play better than a single A team, he looked sharp for sure. I would think he's on a pitch limit on Friday because I think he only went like 3 innings or 3 or 4 innings. So I would think maybe at most he's going to go five. But
Yeah, the Yankees bullpen is really quite good though. It's one of the things that the Yankees have that the Cubs do not have. I
yeah,
mean, it's tough to get through all of those guys in the back end there. See, I think that, it would be an absolutely wonderful feather in the Cubs hat to finish these last 5 games strong and win like
totally.
3 of 5 or 4 of 5 of them
Yeah.
heading into the All-Star break. And I also want to say this team feels like momentum is against it. Like when they had their great winning streak going, they had to take all these days off to fly to London and fly back,
Hmm.
and then they're losing again, right? Like if they were to, it would not shock me at all if they were to win 3 or 4 games here, get some momentum started again, and all of a sudden the All-Star break happens and then the
Yeah.
momentum is gone. It feels like every time they just get started, something interrupts to keep it from happening, from continuing.
It's true, but I would say that a win tonight would go a long way in terms of just feeling like momentum matters. Like winning a game like last night could actually galvanize the team because if you win that game last night and then the Cubs come out and lose 9-0 today, it's like, well, what did we even accomplish with that?
100% agree. From your mouth to the Cubs' ears, go out there and do damage against the Brewers, boys.
That's the plan. Well, Sarah, before I let you go, where can people follow you? What are you working on? I know you were literally just working on an article like up until the minute that we started doing this. So tell people about what you have going on.
Yeah, you can find my writing at bleedcubbyblue.com about the Cubs. You can find my fantasy baseball stuff at Baseball HQ. And my podcast is Cup of Cubby Blue with Danny Rocket. So you can follow that at Cup of Cubby Blue. On Twitter, you can find all of my writing, all of my work. I share all of it on my Twitter account, BCB_Sarah. And I'm a new member of Blue Sky because we all can see that Twitter is falling apart at the seams. So I'm BCB
Cool.
Sarah there. There are no underscores at Blue Sky. So had to drop the underscore, but I think I'm still reasonably easy to find.
There you go. Very nice. It's like when Facebook dropped dropped the underscore. It's cleaner. There you go. You can follow us at Away Games Pod as usual, and I'm gonna put it out in the universe just like I did when I tried to manifest the 3+ game winning streak. The next time you hear my voice on this podcast, the Cubs will have won a game at Yankee Stadium. Hopefully two, hopefully three, and maybe I'll have been at all of them. But I will report back, and that's all I got. See you next week.